Hello, we are Pixel Shark Creations, and this is Polygon Conquest. Right, okay, so what on earth is a Polygon Conquest? So basically it's this open world story-driven FPS that we've been working on for about 3 years, although we only started development on the current version about 6 months ago, and I basically wanted to document its development as a way to get the game out there and hopefully encourage other developers to pick their old projects back up, as this game has gone through many different iterations with its entire storyline and genre being changed. This video will basically be a rundown of the history of the game, as well as a few bits of story thrown in there. So our story starts in 2016, before I even knew what a polygon or a conquest was. Okay, I might have known what the words themselves meant, but the two words together, Polygon Conquest, meant nothing to me. At the time I was beginning learning the basics of programming through JavaScript, as I wanted to learn game development when I found Unity Engine. I made a few awful attempts at fan games and cool concepts way out of my grasp that never went anywhere, and really accomplished very little in terms of actual development. However, using various YouTube tutorials and a myriad of Unity Answers posts, I learnt a lot about programming. However, I'd yet to think up an idea that I could actually stick to and keep working on, which really proved an issue, as I had literally never so much as come close to finishing a game. Although, in fairness, I still really haven't now, but we just don't talk about that. So, fast forward to 2017, and my friend Alex, who now makes art and models for the game, wanted to get into game development and started using Unity. He picked up this free bundle of low-poly assets from the Unity Asset Store, and I started trying to help him learn my limited knowledge of development. It was that day that the original Polygon Conquest was born. The game was very different to what it is today, at the time being a sort of class-based shooter and a weird single-player hub world linking to linear levels and a multiplayer sandbox mode and a multiplayer machine maker, and okay, basically there was way too much stuff. Coupled with my poor organisational skills meant I was hopping between coding different features and adding new ideas whenever I got bored. The whole codebase got very, very bloated. After over a year of this, I realised it would be impossible to finish the game in the state it was in. I improved as a programmer over the course of making the game, switching from coding in JavaScript to C#, so the original core structure of the game was in shambles and impossible to work efficiently with. We knew something drastic had to be done, so we decided to essentially reset, abandoning the old game and creating an entirely new project from scratch, based on the same sort of game, however having learned from the previous attempt. We approached it very differently, deciding exactly what the game would be from the very beginning, meaning no more unnecessary features, half-broken mechanics, and most importantly, a stable base to build the game off, not made from awful JavaScript code. So, an all good, lovely, wonderful, stable game? No. We were in heavy development of this second iteration when we realised the whole structure just wasn't very fun. Class-based linear single-player really didn't work all too well, and we realised we'd have to rethink the entire game right down to its core, deciding what was good and what didn't work. Ultimately, the new Polygon Conquest did away with the multiple playable classes. Okay, not really, but for the sake of simplicity, for the moment we'll just say we got rid of them. Instead focusing around just one of the original classes, Warrior, an all-rounder, melee, sword and shield type. The game's story shifted drastically with a heavier focus on fantasy elements, and perhaps most crucially became open world. No doubt a heavy undertaking for one programmer and one artist, but given time we would populate the world with plenty to do, quests to complete, alongside the main storyline. More on that later. At first we tried sort of slotting these new mechanics into the game we already had, but it was very apparent that wouldn't work with a drastically changed game, and so once again we reset the project and went again, from scratch. And 6 months later, we come to Polygon Conquest as it is today, which I'm sure you're all very, very eager to find out what exactly that is. As of now, we've accomplished a lot with the game. We've got the core features down, the open world, player and inventory, and are now working to populate the world while refining the features we already have. Currently, we are working on one of the game's first zones, Setback Forest, a forest ruled over by a dragon you will have to battle to collect a key. More on those later. Much of the forest is complete, and we're now working to implement the boss battle, and in future we'll populate it with various optional side quests and hidden loot stashes. Now, we've been sort of cryptic as to the game's story up until now, so I'll elaborate on that. The game takes place on a currently unnamed land populated by various different regions, all with vastly different climates, enemies, and histories. There's Polyville, a peaceful safe haven, populated by friendly NPCs and one of the few human settlements in the game. Magma Mountain, a giant and active volcano, which in-game you'll have to climb into in order to fight its boss, a flaming snake, which is another of the game's main bosses much like the dragon, and likewise also drops a key. Magma Mountain is populated by lava creatures you'll have to defeat by somehow cooling their bodies. The aforementioned Setback Forest has a long and complicated history, with echoes of its past lingering in its abandoned mines and castle, which all seem too big for normal humans to occupy comfortably. Setback Forest Dragon holds a magical watch which keeps the area under a constant nighttime, allowing it to become rife with evil, most notably fake trees which can attack you if you get too close. The swamp, name to be decided, is a grueling place where no human would be able to survive without special equipment. The swamp is infested by small slime creatures that will attach to and slow down the player until they cannot be fought off, at which point they will drag the player underground and slowly kill them. Slimes can be fought off with anti-slime equipment, which is quite rare, and so the region is only inhabitable once you're quite far into the game, which is good, as slimes are not the only thing lurking in the swamp. Within its waters is a gigantic crocodile, another boss guarding another key, which will not only attempt to bite, but also attack it with its tail in order to defend its treasure. Dusty Desert is hot and expansive, a barren land. However, its huge pyramid suggests that once it may have housed human occupants. However, the pyramid became overrun by sand creatures, ruled over by a giant sand golem, which also holds a key. Lake Poly is a large body of water in the centre of the map, full of mutated fish and humanoid and yet amphibian enemies. At the lake's bottom are large shark patrols, also holding a key, that guards valuable treasures that make unlocking the rest of the lake's secrets a breeze. Ghastly Glaciers is a large icy area elevated from the rest of the land. To get up, you need special climbing equipment. Once there, you'll need to thaw out a giant ice spike containing another key while avoiding its native enemies, very angry snowmen. Finally, there's Ye Olde Polytown, an abandoned civilization housing some of the game's most brutal challenges, and its final boss. To get into Old Polytown, you'll need to use all of the keys acquired elsewhere throughout the world, and if you want any hope of surviving, you'll need strong armor and weaponry to battle the electrified zombies. As you may have noticed, I've yet to mention what all this key collecting and boss battling is all for, and so I shall tell you. Thousands of years ago, there were 5 great mages who used their combined magical abilities to advance the world and build sprawling civilizations. The world lived in peace for hundreds of years, until a man known only as the Wanderer, born out of the fires of Magma Mountain, loved by no one, sought to take this power as his own in order to create what he thought of as a better, stronger civilization, founded on supporting the strong and eliminating those he called weak. The Wanderer gained his name by travelling throughout the world, recruiting those who agreed with his goals and monsters he managed to persuade to join him. The 5 mages recognised this threat, and so transferred their powers into 5 scrolls which they cast off throughout the world into the previously mentioned regions. Each scroll alone meant nothing, however together they would grant the one who owned them the mage's powers. The mages, now stripped of their magical abilities, found 8 different guardians, the game's original classes, apart from the warrior, who is obviously the current main character, to protect the scrolls and defeat the Wanderer. These 8 guardians were the mage, who was one of the 5 original mages, and created a magical staff which gave him limited abilities, despite him transferring his own powers into the scrolls. Techie, a slightly insane genius, who created complex machines and weapons he used to protect the scrolls. Ninja, a master of stealth who uses katana and silent movement as a defensive tool, with those he attacked being unable to see or hear him, he made quick work of his foes. Ice Wolf, a dog with human intelligence and healing powers she used to assist her fellow defenders. Slug, a giant but strong man carrying a chain and meat cleaver. His brutal attacks were not graceful but very heavy hitting. Ranger, while not the most intelligent, his skills with a bow meant he could quickly dispatch foes at a distance. Merciless, a cowboy with a strong bond with his horse, the cavalry. Merciless's sharp shooting skills made him effective at defeating his foes quickly from any distance. Quickshot, a friend of Techie's armed with dual crossbows and a grappling hook. His quick movement skills meant his enemies couldn't run from him, as he could always catch up. For years the Guardian successfully fought off the Wanderer's allies. However, while he sent them in, he himself was gaining more power. The Wanderer dabbled with dark magic he used to extend his life and strength, however damaging his physical form until he was eventually unrecognizable as a human being. But his power was unmatched, not even by the Guardians. The Wanderer sought out the scrolls personally, along with an army of allies, and against this barely human beast the Guardians fell, with Mage being killed, and the Wanderer took the scrolls and began crafting his new world, starting with the most inhabited area, Polytown. As a last resort, the remaining barely surviving Guardians contained the Wanderer within Polytown and evacuated those remaining. Few survived the evacuation. Those that did fled to rebuild a new civilization, what is now Polyville. The Guardians locked the Wanderer into Polytown, sending the keys throughout the world, where he remained sealed for many years, his barely human form unable to flee. Until today, which is where the game itself actually takes place. Polyville was stormed by a giant beast attempting to kill human residents. However, the warrior, who you play as, manages to barely fight it off with haphazardly crafted weapons. An old man, alive at the time of the Wanderer, recognizes the beast as an ally of him, and he realizes the Wanderer is beginning to destroy the field, sealing him into Old Polytown, as he is now able to communicate with his allies once more. With the old man being weak, he takes the warrior to Old Polytown, where, sure enough, a dark cloud is lurking above it. The old man informs the warrior of what needs to be done. The seal around Polytown works both ways. Nobody can go in, and nobody can come out. So while the Wanderer is breaking out, nobody can get in to stop him. The warrior must find the keys all over the world and enter Old Polytown to finally defeat the Wanderer and destroy the scrolls, allowing the world to rebuild and return to its peaceful state. And I think that is all of the key points, although each region does have its own very complicated history, which I hope to explain in future videos. For now, that is what Polygon Conquest is right now, as well as a little bit of story thrown in there. Well, I say a little bit, it was actually quite a lot, but you know. I hope to see you in the next devlog, where I will expand on the progress made on the actual game itself.